this edition of Sightings. Recently declassified tapes prove that one of America's most strategic Air Force bases had a major encounter with UFOs.
It was not anything that we know of as a flying object that could do the maneuvers that this did.
Carla Wall investigates a UFO encounter at Edwards Air Force Base. Then, inside this charming getaway, a harmless game unleashes paranormal forces.
Beware. Those that seek ghosts will find them, but they may not like what they find.
Later, find out why many of our founding fathers believed in life, liberty, and the pursuit of the paranormal.
It's a profound legacy, but it's the legacy of the ancient mystery schools.
And under wraps for 70 years, Sightings uncovers the stormy results of a test for life on Mars.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. A majority of UFO sightings are reported within close proximity to U.S. military installations, leading skeptics to argue that UFOs aren't extraterrestrial spacecraft, but top-secret military hardware. But what happens when a UFO is sighted near an Air Force base, and even the military admits that they don't know what it is? From Edwards Air Force Base, California, Carla Wall reports.
Edwards Air Force Base in California's Mojave Desert is an area where people often gather to scan the skies for UFO activity. But what about the people inside Edwards? Are they seeing UFOs too? According to this historic tape, they are.
Some confirmed reports of some unidentified flying objects in your area. But should be approximately, there was approximately 5 to 7 objects, green, red, and white flashing lights. From Edwards.
And Sightings has also obtained still photographs of an Edwards Air Force Base radar screen taken on the day of the incident. They clearly show radar returns from the unidentified objects.
That's those 3 little dots out there, and I'll say that there are 3 definite objects. It's not weather, it's not clutter.
It was 1965, the Cuban Missile Crisis still fresh in everyone's mind. The military was on constant alert for foreign intruders, but the Air Force was not expecting the kind of intruders who pierced the Edwards Shield on the night of October 7th. There are those who believe these visitors came from beyond our world, not to invade, but to make contact.
This incident happened 30 years ago, and back then, these planes right here, these Blackbirds, were top secret. What's to say that this isn't what they saw that night up in the sky?
Well, because these things don't glow. They're not made to be illuminated, to be spotted. They're made not to be seen.
Independent producer Sam Sherman has created a compelling audio documentary about that eerie night titled The Edwards Air Force Base Encounter. His source material was a confusing jumble of declassified Air Force tape, which covered hours of official military communication.
The tapes have finally been declassified. Why did you decide to do something with them?
I felt the public should know something about it. It's a subject that has been ridiculed for many years. I was stunned to find out that a squadron of 12 UFOs was over Edwards and that there was an alert status and that 5 other bases were involved and NORAD was involved. It shocked me.
And Sherman pointed out that one of the biggest surprises revealed in the tapes was that Air Force bases like Edwards had assigned UFO officers.
They didn't have any demon officers or leprechaun officers or angel officers for all the other paranormal subjects. They had UFO officers.
Okay, they've finally gotten that UFO officer at Edwards Lieutenant, and he said yes, he would like to have a look. We're getting plenty of live data as visuals on these things about 40 miles south of Edwards, several of them running.
At the radar screen in the Edwards Tower that night was Air Force Tech Sergeant Chuck Sorrells. He's not spoken publicly about the incident for more than 30 years, until now.
Looking back now, what do you think What do you think it was? You've had 30 years to sort of think about it and wonder.
I've thought about it on a lot of occasions. I know it was not an aircraft. I know it was not a helicopter. I know it was not a weather balloon. I know a lot of things it was not. It was not anything that we know of as a flying object that could do the maneuvers that this did. And what it was, I do not know.
Soon after Sorrell started his shift, he alerted his superiors to the mysterious objects hovering and darting about the base. Objects shown on this Air Force photograph of his radar screen. The decision was made to scramble an F-106 alert bird.
Edwards, do you still have any of these UFOs in sight? Yes. Okay, Tower, pick out one you want us to intercept, and we'll take a 0-1 in on him.
The chase was on, but the pilot faced a formidable challenge.
That thing is rising. Tower, how's things look now? He's low. Look, search high, search high. It doesn't search high. Search very high. The thing is rising. It's rising rapidly. We're at 40,000 feet. Still low. Search high.
The F-106 pilot, when he went up there, did you think he ever had a chance of catching up?
The way it rose, as fast as it went up in altitude and he passed under it at 40,000 feet, not a prayer. Not a prayer, not a chance.
Was a mismatch.
Oh, completely. There ain't no way he could have caught that thing.
After listening to the audio account of what the Air Force referred to as the incident, Washington, D.C. MUFON Director Elaine Douglas is convinced that the tapes provide solid evidence of extraterrestrial craft.
Elaine, we are sitting here in your office, surrounded by books and transcripts and videotapes of sightings. What about this particular audio recording impressed you so much?
It's real. It's live. It's the U.S. government talking about seeing UFOs, lots of them, over a military base. Clearly, they're in airspace where the only things that are supposed to be in that airspace would be U.S. military aircraft, and they're not there. And because we have the tape record of it, we know that it really happened, and it cannot be denied by the U.S. government.
Some people involved in the UFO community believe that these tapes, what happened to you that night, proves that UFOs exist.
I don't dispute that, not in the least. I think what we're going to find out now, that the Cold War is over, that you're going to get more and more of these, what has been classified over the years, released, and they're going to be able to reach some kind of a conclusion as to what we have seen.
Because sightings like these often lead to ridicule, Sorrell is relieved to learn after so many years that there are other eyewitnesses and hours of audio tape to back up his story.
I don't like to be the only one saying these type things.
There's one point on that tape that struck me, and it's when you said, I don't want to be the only one seeing this stuff.
Yes. You know, if you're the only guy in the whole world that saw this thing, then how in the world is anybody going to believe you? You know, I mean, you're the crazy. But if you can get another half dozen people, it's not so bad.
In fact, 700 international scientists and engineers were at Edwards that night. Many believe it was more than just a coincidence.
They were there on Edwards for a conference at the time. And I've always kind of wondered, well, did they come there to put on a show for the scientists, or was they there trying to find out what the scientists were doing? I don't know. But it was just kind of strange that they decided to show up that night as opposed to some other night.
Do you believe in UFOs, extraterrestrials?
I think the possibility very strongly exists that, yes, there is something beyond what we know.
Does it make any sense to you what it could possibly be? No, we're in as much of the dark night as you are.
When Sightings contacted the Air Force for official comment on the Edwards incident, our investigator was told only that the documents in this report are characteristic of Air Force documents of the period. Beyond that, they have no official comment on the case.
Next, a brush with death opens a doctor's mind. Later, inside this bed and breakfast, a game unleashes a hidden evil.
We've all heard it, that little voice inside that warns us in the nick of time or tells us which way to turn on an unfamiliar street. It's called intuition, ESP, or just plain common sense. But what happens when that little voice tells you to do something that doesn't make sense? Do you ignore it? Or do you trust that sixth sense to know more than your conscious mind?
I'm going to take a look into your eyes.
Okay.
Just going to dim the lights.
Dr. Yvonne Kaysen was brought up in her native Canada to trust the rational, the real, the scientific. And by the time she was 16, she knew she was going to be a physician.
I think that I was a sort of scientific person. Mainly, I was very good in math, and I was very good in science, and I did extremely well in school.
She earned top honors in medical school, graduated with distinction, and then set up her own practice based on the conservative approach to medicine she'd been taught.
I had a very traditional medical practice. Really, on the outside, I taught with the University of Toronto, and I taught medical students and residents. I also became very active in the various medical bodies. So I really did traditional practice.
She did practice that way, but she doesn't anymore. Something happened to Dr. Kaysen that altered not only her approach to medicine, but also fundamentally changed the way she's perceived the world around her. 1979, Northern Ontario, Canada. Dr. Kaysen, a nurse, and the pilot of a small plane were transporting a critically ill patient. A freak blizzard caused the plane to lose power.
I thought, I'm gonna die. And the plane was going in this really rough turbulence, crashing down to the ground. So we had to very quickly get out of the plane as the plane was sinking into the water.
The plane sank very fast, taking the life of the patient with it.
This was sub-zero freezing weather when this happened. It was about 20 below. I was wearing heavy clothes, and there I was. I looked around, and blizzard happening around me. What should I do? And a voice in my head spoke, and the voice said, swim to shore.
But the shore was 200 yards away, across a heavy downstream current. Swimming didn't seem to be the best option.
Now, at this point, the pilot started saying, everybody climb on the ice, everyone get on the ice. And I remember sort of arguing with this voice in my head. So I didn't start swimming to shore. I started trying to crawl up on the ice. And every time that I tried to get up on the ice, I'd sink into the water from the weight of my arms. So finally, I surrendered to that voice, and I started swimming to shore.
But the swim was too difficult, and in her frenzy, Dr. Kaysen had a remarkable experience.
It seemed like my consciousness, or my point of perception, raised up above my body somehow, and I was 15 or 20 feet above my body, watching what was happening to my body down below. It was most extraordinary. I'd gone to this place that was filled with light. There was this intense feeling of love. And at the moment of what appeared to be my death, I totally surrendered to the divine, just...
Once she surrendered to this non-physical presence, Dr. Kaysen believes she was given the strength to reach the shore. A rescue team rushed Dr. Kaysen, the nurse, and pilot to the hospital. They were all unconscious.
I was in this wonderful, expanded place up here, and suddenly, with a noise, I was sucked into my body, and all of a sudden, I was back. The experience changed my life in a lot of ways. I really wanted to figure out what it was. That was the scientific part of me. And so I spoke with my medical friends, the doctors, and I remember everyone would scratch their chin and sort of listen, wondering what it could be. No one knew what it was. People would give me theories like, oh, maybe this was due to a low blood sugar, or maybe this was a direct effect of cold on the brain causing a hallucination. But none of that was good enough for me.
After much study, Dr. Kaysen now believes she had what paranormal researchers call the near-death experience.
I totally had lost my fear of death, and that persists to this day.
Dr. Kaysen also believes that since the experience, she has acquired psychic abilities, including clairvoyance.
It seems that having a near-death experience opens your consciousness somehow and makes you more open to various sorts of other mystical and paranormal experiences, such as the clairvoyant experience.
Kevin, you see that house right there? That's where Aunt Yvonne grew up.
Colleen Isherwood has been Yvonne Kaysen's friend for 30 years. They grew up together in this Toronto neighborhood.
Before she had her near-death experience, Yvonne was not the type of person who would talk about anything mystical like that, anything unusual.
But the more she began talking about her paranormal experiences, the more she heard from others with similar stories.
Many people who'd had various sorts of spiritual or paranormal experiences were looking for a doctor who would listen to their story and who wouldn't automatically judge it as something crazy or a hallucination or a sign of mental illness. So I found people over the years started coming to my office so that more and more of my patients ended up being people who'd had spiritual or paranormal experiences. So my practice started shifting in this direction.
When I started seeing Yvonne, I said, what I want to do is first find out that I'm not crazy, number one, what I'm experiencing, and what I want to become is a more spiritual person.
Today, Dr. Kaysen is the director of the Spiritual Emergence Research and Referral Clinic in Toronto. Along with a staff of physicians and other healthcare professionals, Dr. Kaysen has steered her practice towards the care and support of patients like Alexis Radlin.
After about 11 years of research, I really felt ready to start talking publicly to doctors and to the public about what I'd come to understand about mystical and paranormal phenomenon.
And in her book, A Farther Shore, Dr. Kaysen chronicles the personal stories of more than 100 of her patients, all of whom have been transformed by a paranormal experience.
I know now to the core of my being that it's a universal human phenomenon. Anyone can have a spiritually transformative experience. And if you do have one, it's truly a gift that can enrich your life.
Dr. Kaysen has found that you don't have to have a near-death experience like hers to undergo a spiritual transformation. For those seeking a deeper self-understanding, she recommends meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, and intense, prolonged reading on any subject.
Next, scientists may have finally discovered life in outer space. And did a groundswell of good intentions create a medical miracle?
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. Researchers exploring the authenticity of the alien abduction phenomenon will soon have a new database to draw from. Work has begun on the most comprehensive review of alien abduction accounts ever compiled. In Morice, Michigan, Dan Wright, former deputy director of MUFON, is compiling data from alien abduction experiences throughout North America. It is an unprecedented program called the MUFON Alien Abduction Transcription Project, and its goal is to create a comprehensive computer database of abduction experience.
These are people from all walks of life, equal numbers approximately of males and females, and of an age from early childhood until perhaps in one's 50s.
Over 50 MUFON researchers are now working on the project, using hypnotherapy to bring out details of the abduction experience from volunteers. So far, more than 200 experiencers have participated in the transcription project, and more than 900 pages of data have been collected. Even MUFON veterans are surprised at the number of startlingly similar details.
There are so many of these that cut across numerous cases that I know it has to be a real phenomenon, and now I have to stay around until the last chapter is drawn out.
After Wright receives the transcriptions of the hypnotherapy sessions, he breaks the information down into 54 different categories, building a physical composite of the abductors and a blueprint for their craft. Thus far, his analysis of the database has led him to believe that extraterrestrial contact on a global scale may be very near.
I think we're coming to some sort of culmination, whether that has to do with some tumultuous event on the Earth. All cases that I've been dealing with are suggestive of something happening very soon.
Government researchers in Bethesda, Maryland, report the discovery of a microscopic bug with properties that are simply out of this world. The remarkable find of the bacterium Deinococcus radiodurans lends support to the theory of panspermia, that life on Earth was born from cosmic spores drifting in outer space.
We picked it up from elephant feces in a zoo in Japan, from llama feces, from weathered granite in Antarctica, from irradiated underpants in Sweden.
In fact, this bacterium has been found to have more radiation resistance than any other known creature, even enough to withstand extraterrestrial travel.
There's nothing terrestrial that we know about that would call for that kind of radiation resistance.
Studies continue to determine the origin of Deinococcus radiodurans and to decode secrets of the universe that might be locked inside its DNA. At the University of Virginia Medical Center, Dr. Neil Kussel is crediting a young boy's miraculous recovery from a brain tumor to both modern medicine and psychic healing.
Craig's mental attitude at the time of his surgery was extremely positive. That he made a dramatic and remarkable recovery, far greater than I would have anticipated. Goes beyond the science of the medicine that we applied.
In the final stages of his brain tumor, 12-year-old Craig Shergold made one last dying wish. He wanted to be immortalized in the Guinness Book of World Records as the recipient of the most Get Well cards. With the help of the Children's Wish Foundation International, Craig reached that goal, receiving over 100 million cards.
Knowing that he had the support of these tens of millions of people had a material effect on not only the speed but the completeness of his recovery.
Recent studies have shown that prayers and concentrated meditation can have a positive effect on healing. Were the good wishes and healing words expressed in these cards a form of health-giving prayer? It is one possible explanation for Craig's inexplicable recovery. And Dr. Kussel believes the cards did effect a cure for Craig's life-threatening illness.
I think that the patients need spirituality. I think that the families and their friends need spirituality. And I think that most of all, the surgeons and the other caregivers have to have a high degree of spirituality if you're going to optimize the outcome in these patients.
We'll have more stories from the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up on Sightings.
What our founding fathers really meant by the spirit of America.
Lincoln consulted a so-called psychic when he was first running for Congress.
Later, what our government knew about radio signals from Mars.
A president of the United States consults with an astrologer before making an important political decision. A congressman is transformed by his son's near-death experience. A famous general channels his past life as a Roman soldier. May sound like the plot of a great new novel, but it's not. It's what really happens behind closed doors in our nation's capital. Washington, D.C., the nerve center of the most powerful nation on earth. These stolid edifices, the buildings where America's future is debated and voted on, evoke the spirit of the founding fathers, pragmatic, intellectual thinkers who brought forth a great nation. But our early leaders were, in fact, highly spiritual people with a belief in divine guidance and supernatural intuition, and they were all deeply committed to ancient secret societies.
The driving force was the people who were part of the Freemasonry movement. For example, all the signers of the Declaration of Independence except one was a Freemason.
Milton Friedman has spent the last 30 years as a speechwriter and presidential advisor, and has held high-ranking positions in both the White House and the Congress. I spoke with him recently about the history of mystical activities on the Hill, particularly the early influence of the Freemasons' paranormal view of the world. There's a mystical dimension to the Masonic order. Can you talk about that?
The philosophy of the Masons, which was at that time a mystical approach, was a idea of higher vision in the affairs of humanity. And when Washington dedicated the United States Capitol, he used the Masonic symbolism.
Masonic influence is evident in the architecture of Washington, D.C., where pyramids, pillars, and numerology are repeated in nearly every official building. In fact, the entire Capitol Mall may have been designed after the floor plan of a Masonic temple, an east-west rectangle attached to an unfinished triangle. The Lodge Master would reside at the cap of the triangle, where the Capitol stands today. Talk about the dollar bill. What are the symbols on the dollar bill that relate back to the Masonic notions of the founders?
The all-seeing eye comes straight out of the Masonic symbology. The idea of the pyramid was America as a spiritual nation has yet work to do, is not completed, and that's why the capstone is separated from the rest of the pyramid.
The Masonic beliefs of the Founding Fathers were passed down to successive generations of government leaders, to this day, in fact. But other types of supernatural beliefs have also influenced government, including Abraham Lincoln's belief in psychic ability.
Lincoln consulted a so-called psychic or clairvoyant when he was first running for Congress and was told that he had a profound future. When he was president, it is known through historical records that he had a woman come to the White House to give so-called readings. Before he was assassinated, he dreamed of seeing himself in a casket, lying in state.
And in this century, mysticism was a silent, influential partner to one of America's greatest generals.
Patton is said to have had the power of retrocognition, of seeing himself in past lives, in battles. He was a general, whether back in Roman days. And some say that his daring and his intuition of what the enemy might do resulted in his success as a dynamic commander.
And trust in supernatural power was not limited to the U.S. or to serving the good of humankind.
One of the most intuitive people of the 20th century was Adolf Hitler. The role of psychics and mystics in the early Nazis indicated that there's a dark side, there's a shadow side. So this is a power that can be used for good or bad.
And according to some sources who have spoken to Sightings, the ability to twist psychic power into a weapon has been studied at the Pentagon. Former members of top-secret government projects claim that the military is continuing to train intelligence officers in remote viewing, a technique in which untapped powers of the mind are being probed for their potential as a psychotronic weapon of the future. But Representative Charlie Rose believes that exploring the paranormal has the potential to do more good than harm. In 1976, Rose created the Congressional Clearinghouse on the Future and arranged meetings between his fellow members of Congress and alternative thinkers, such as Alvin Toffler, the Dalai Lama, Dr. Jonas Salk, and several psychics.
One of the byproducts of the Clearinghouse was that a lot of members became aware that they had greater intuitive powers than they thought they had, and that they made better use of their intuition and solved a great deal of problems that way.
A professor from China predicted the development in the Iran-Iraq war, the idea of Desert Storm, and all of these things way before they had ever occurred.
And it is this trust in the intuitive and our own spiritual nature, says Friedman, that is the ultimate legacy from our Masonic founding fathers. He challenges today's leaders to accept and exploit the great potential that exists within the new realm of paranormal politics.
That's the real paranormal thing, is the alchemy that takes place in your life when you allow greater integrities to be incorporated into your life. So that's what Masonry is about, transformation.
The Founding Fathers learned how to quietly listen to their minds and be channels for information about how to put America together as the home of freedom for the whole world. We need to do that again. We need to keep that process ongoing.
Milton Friedman believes that politicians have little to lose and everything to gain if they will admit the role intuition and perhaps even paranormal phenomena play in their decision-making. Friedman suggests that we may be on the brink of a new American revolution where the fight over ideas will take on a whole new dimension.
Next, how this California bed and breakfast fell under the influence of darker forces.
We played with the Ouija board. We attracted ghosts.
Unlike a lot of people, Kathleen Poring wanted to make contact with the ghosts said to haunt the turn-of-the-century home that she had just purchased. She sought out the spirits with candles and a Ouija board. Her efforts to contact echoes from the past paid off when ghostly activity began resonating throughout her home. It was her new turn-of-the-century home that inspired Kathleen Poring to pull out the Ouija board and dabble in ancient rites said to evoke the spirits of the dead.
Beware, beware. Those that seek ghosts will find them, but they may not like what they find.
After the death of her husband, Richard, in 1988, Kathleen wanted a complete lifestyle change and chose to move from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara, to a place she just knew was her dream home, despite some chilling words from her real estate agent.
He said that 8 people had died in the house. And as he was telling me the history, I said, I'm thinking to myself, the house must be haunted.
Kathleen bought the house and converted it into a cozy bed and breakfast. She decorated the home with relics she found in the attic, and this seemed to bring out strange phenomena that both Kathleen and her boyfriend, Mark, experienced.
Lots of times when we would be discussing the ghost, music would come on, lights came on. You know, we lit candles at night. We played with the Ouija board. We did all sorts of crazy things, and we attracted ghosts.
John Ronner has studied various forms of spirit contact and warns against attempting to communicate with the other side in a frivolous manner.
If you open up forces in your life, you want to make sure that these are benevolent forces and not malevolent ones. Playing with the Ouija board in many cases, perhaps in most cases, is not a good idea.
But the forces in Kathleen's house seemed benevolent, and during one episode, they were downright playful.
Mark was sitting in my bedroom with the door opened, and suddenly there was a light.
An incredibly bright, white, pinpoint light shot right towards me.
It traveled down the stairs, and at the same time, it traveled up the stairs.
That was my first experience with actually seeing something that caused me instantly to know that there was something else going on here that I'd never experienced before.
After that episode, Kathleen sought out deeper communication with the ghosts she felt in her home. She began automatic writing, where words would flow onto the paper without conscious thought from her.
When I read them afterwards, I was totally amazed, completely amazed, because I knew that they were not my words, they were not my thinking, and I knew that it didn't come from me.
Kathleen's daughter, Cherie, did not support her mother's flirtation with the unknown.
I felt uncomfortable with it. It did frighten me. I felt more like she was entertaining it.
But Cherie kept her reservations to herself. Her mother was happy. The bed and breakfast was coming together and had begun accepting guests. Times were good until the supernatural forces began to turn on Kathleen.
I was walking down the stairs, and suddenly I felt somebody push me from behind.
Then the forces turned on Cherie while she was pregnant. Something pushed her down the stairs, too.
it was getting a little strange. It was not just playful, but it was becoming a little dangerous.
It's very common for people to play with fire when it comes to the other side, and most of the time it's just very innocent. People don't realize what they're getting into until it's too late, until that channel is opened up and these forces begin to act on them.
Hello, the Mary May.
Kathleen tried to put the frightening events behind her to move forward with her business. She stopped using the Ouija board, but continued to feel a strange force compelling her to do automatic writing.
One time I got a message that was titled Ruffled Pillows, and I thought, oh good, this is going to be really good. This is going to be about romance.
But when she studied the message, Kathleen realized that ruffled pillows was a warning that she would soon become very ill, confined to her bed.
I didn't know what to do about it. I did not like that message. Well, 2 days later, I came down with a very serious illness.
I was really worried. I mean, I've never seen my mom like that. I mean, to have someone unable to get out of bed, I mean, that sick, out of nowhere.
Pata Evans is the Santa Barbara doctor who diagnosed Kathleen's illness.
She suffered from the chronic fatigue syndrome, and she wanted to sense the magic bullet, and I couldn't give it to her, and I didn't know anyone for that particular condition.
I was under all sorts of medication. I could not get better. It seemed like everything I did, I just kept getting worse and worse.
Kathleen was bedridden for 6 months. It was during a moment of complete despair that she had a breakthrough. Why not invite healing forces into the house in the same way that she'd invited in the malevolent ghosts?
I said, oh God, send your angels, put them around me and protect me, and it has worked.
In less than a day, Kathleen was back on her feet. She reopened her home to guests, convinced that angels were changing the energy in the house.
They actually appeared before me. Angels appeared before me. And it has changed my whole world, my whole life.
The ghosts who had been such a destructive force in Kathleen's life have not made a reappearance since her first angelic vision. But she continues to feel the presence of benevolent spirits in her home and in her life.
I think this is a happy ending for Kathleen because she learned to keep her face turned toward the light and away from the random otherworldly forces that could harm her. Now that Kathleen's bed and breakfast, the Mary May, is up and running again, she's put away the Ouija board. Now, there are angels everywhere, and Kathleen believes that they have the power to keep away the evil forces that once ruled the house.
Next, did the government cover up evidence of life on Mars?
They sent it to a cryptologist, and I don't believe it was ever satisfactorily deciphered to see what they had gotten.
Recently, Sightings brought you images of the surface of Mars, taken by the Viking space probe. A large structure is clearly visible, which looks remarkably like a human face. The pictures are intriguing, but they're not the first evidence of a face on Mars. That happened in 1924. It is reasonably certain that Mars has been inhabited in the past and is inhabited now. These were the words of Dr. David Todd, an Amherst College professor and astronomy genius who believed he had recorded a radio message from Mars.
David Todd was, like many people, a believer in the existence of intelligent beings on Mars because of the apparent existence of features that seemed to be not natural, but engineered. And so his idea was that, in fact, we should listen to Mars and we should see if we could pick up radio signals directed towards us.
Today's search for extraterrestrial intelligence is high-tech and computerized, but in 1924, one of the greatest mechanical minds in the country was an appliance builder named C. Francis Jenkins.
If there was anyone in the kind of world of invention at that time who had all the tools to do the kind of thing that Todd wanted to have done, I think Jenkins was a logical choice.
Jenkins had already developed an early form of television that converted radio signals into images on film. Dr. Todd had Jenkins aim this device toward Mars on a day of national radio silence in October of 1924.
Effectively, from what I understand, they used it to aim at Mars, knowing that it was going to be closest to the Earth on whatever that date was, and used it to record signals of some kind coming from Mars.
The signals proved to be astonishing. For the first time in human history, a strange message coming from the direction of Mars was actually recorded on film.
They brought the film back and then had markings on the film which were very hard to decipher. There was apparently something that looked like a face that was constantly repeated along one edge of the film.
And it was this first so-called face on Mars that rocked the scientific world in 1924. Many called it Martian code and demanded that it be deciphered. Todd and Jenkins submitted their film to the country's leading cryptologist. No one knows what happened next.
They sent it to a cryptologist, and I don't believe it was ever satisfactorily deciphered to see what they had gotten.
That cryptologist was the late William Friedman, the United States government's master of decoded military secrets and the godfather of the CIA.
William Friedman is important in cryptology basically because of national security issues. He was working for the government in a security area, decoding messages.
And what happened when two of America's best scientists met the master of cryptology? The answer has been shrouded in mystery for 3/4 of a century, until Sightings finally tracked down the long-lost Mars film in Friedman's personal archives at the Virginia Military Institute.
William Friedman looked at the code, made an attempt to decipher it. There's no evidence in the files which indicate that he actually broke the code. Why he did not return the files to the gentleman who brought this subject to his attention is not known.
As a result, both Todd and Jenkins died in obscurity, like their once famous Mars message. In Friedman's archives, purged by the National Security Agency of much of its important correspondence, we did find one revealing letter. The author reports that his men had recorded the same radio signals on that same day in 1924.
They consisted in part of dashes of 6 seconds duration, separated by intervals of 7 seconds. These dashes continued for several minutes, were followed by a voice pronouncing words. They were isolated words of from 1 to 4 syllables.
The author of this amazing letter to Friedman was a captain in the U.S. Signal Corps. Could this be Todd and Jenkins' ultimate vindication? A clue hidden by Friedman until he was no longer here to keep the secret.
To decode a message from another planet that may or may not indicate extraterrestrial life, I believe William Friedman would have seen that as the ultimate code.
During our research for this story, Sightings was contacted by the NSA, the National Security Agency. They informed us that while they would supply us with material relating to the 1924 face on Mars, they wanted us to know that neither the NSA nor the CIA has ever officially engaged in the collection of intelligence concerning messages from extraterrestrials.
If you've had a paranormal experience, please write to us at Sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword Sightings. At the Sightings Forum, download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips. Also, join us daily in our chat room, live on AOL.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows. Tonight on Farscape. A heinous crime.
You're under arrest, alien, for murder.
And a false confession.
I crushed that man's throat. I am guilty.
Lead to a trial of errors.
Trust me, I'm a lawyer.
I hereby find the defendant guilty.
Wait!
3 solar days from now, she's executed.
Sci-Fi's Farscape. Tonight at 8, only on Sci-Fi.